Hello, everyone. This is another poetry reading session by Jim Ransom, and I hope you find our selections today interesting. This is a fairly well-rehearsed program. I went through the whole program a few minutes ago, only then realized I hadn't hooked up my microphone, which is right here, and which I use to give the reading a little more pizzazz. You know, the microphones in the iPads, which I'm using, are not the best. Not meant as a criticism for Apple, so Apple, please don't turn me off. Let me finish. This is Super Bowl weekend, isn't it? And since I've been a Kansas City Chiefs fan ever since that team was first organized, I guess you can imagine who I'm cheering for this weekend. However, we're going to read a variety of poems today, and we're going to start with one by Anne Waldman called Scallop Song. I'll read it for you and then we'll make some comments on it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Scallop Song by Anne Waldman. I wore a garland of the briar that put me now in awe. I wore a garland of the brain that was whole. It commanded me, done babbling, and I no more blabbed. Spare no lie. Tell womanhood, she shake off pity. Tell the man to give up tumult for the while, to wonder at the sight of baby's beauty. Now let the monsters fray us with things that not be. From a high tower, poem issuing. Everything run along in creation till I end the song. None fit for so wild beasts. None so joyous. None no give, no lie. Tell old woes to leave off here. I sing this into a scallop shell with face of pearl and leave all sorrow by and by. Well, that's interesting to say the least. Anne Waldman was a poet who has been influenced by just about every trendy idea that has arisen since she got her start in the 1960s. Her first influences were from beat poetry and jazz. You can probably tell that. And she has been a poet who has put some of her work to music and chants or sings it. I went to the Poetry Foundation website and found this poem as one that she was reading herself, I think, and singing. It's very interesting, and you might want to go there and do that same thing. Her first job after college was to work for the New York St. Mark's Church Poetry Project. St. Mark's is a upscale, very, very liberal, progressive Episcopal church. And for many years, it has had a poetry project. I doubt if you can find a Bible in the whole church, but lots of poetry. She worked with Ted Berrigan and Allen Ginsberg. Remember him? He's the one who wrote the famous beat poem, Howl. It is safe to say that her poetry is magical in its inspiration, and she is also famous for performing with dancers and musicians. I don't know whether she has written the music for her poems, perhaps, but somebody has. And they're not all to music, but this one that I just read was put to music, and she sang it herself. Now, next is a poem by another very successful East Coast academic poet, whose name is Gail Mazer. Gail Mazer. This poem is called Ice. In the warming house, children lace their skates, bending, choked over their thick jackets. A Franklin stove keeps the place so cozy it's hard to imagine why anyone would leave. Clumping across the frozen beach to the river, December's always the same at Ware's Cove. The first sheer ice, black, then white and deep until the city sends trucks of men with wooden barriers to put up the boys' hockey rink. An hour of skating after school, of trying wobbly figure eights. An hour of distances moved backwards without falling. Then twilight. The warming house steamy with girls pulling on boots, their chafed legs aching. Outside, the hockey players keep playing, slamming the round black puck until it's dark, until supper. At night, a shy girl comes to the cove with her father. Although there isn't music, they glide arm in arm onto the blurred surface together, braced like dancers. She thinks she'll never be so happy, for who else will find her graceful? Who else find her perfect, skate with her in circles outside the emptied rink forever? I think that's a wonderful, warm poem. And it's one that I was rather surprised to be coming from Gail Mazer. She's a woman 1 year younger than I am and still writing. She's published several books of poetry and established the Blacksmith House Poetry Series, which is read on a weekly basis in Harvard Square. And as is common for poets in her circle, she has been an activist for progressive causes, against nuclear war and against just about everything that the progressives don't like. But none of that has had much impact on her poetry, which is basically lyrical as far as I can see. Now, next. This is a pièce de résistance. In honor of the Pros Super Bowl coming tomorrow, here's a poem by Richard Katrovas. Richard Katrovas has a very brief biography on the Poetry Foundation website, and I'll quote the first sentence in its entirety. Born in Norfolk, Virginia, Richard Katrovas spent his earliest years traveling with his family while his father, a con man, attempted to evade arrest. Wow, what an introduction. Okay, here's the poem by Richard Katrovas, American Football. That I would even use the phrase suggests a false yet useful worldliness, a scope far greater than my caste would indicate. The phrase signals, I've lived abroad. I've watched the Premier League in European pubs. In fact, I hate the game. Its ethos rests on boring strategies and rules that cope merely with competitions linked to fate, how luck and skill dovetail in every botched clear kick on goal, and every header rubs against the grain of what is beautiful in sport, at least to my Yankee Doodle eyes. Give me smashmouth football over soccer. Give me concussions, shattered bones, ripped muscles, strategies of season-long attrition. Give me huge men heaving their bountiful frames against each other with such grace that size seems incidental to the role of stalker, of fleet backs and fleeter ends, men who bustle along the line of scrimmage on a mission. 160-pound defensive end. I was a scourge of JV quarterbacks. I blitzed on every down, so spent the game with most of the action at my back. The coach didn't seem to care. He was drunk on power and vodka. Said my job was to defend right flank from sweeps and register some sacks. Helter-skelter, I dreamed of gridiron fame, much less than mediocre. I could not broach the fact of pain, the realm where bruises flower. I sympathize with that. My last encounter with organized football was in junior high school. And to give you some idea of how small we were in that era, I was a tackle. And flowering bruises convinced me that maybe poetry would be a better place. Well, anyway, I think I'll give you a little more information about Richard Katrovas, because I suspect most of you have not heard much about him. I read you about his early years with his father, the con man, trying to evade arrest. But finally he was adopted by relatives as a teenager, and they actually took him to Japan for 3 years. That was probably a cleansing experience for him. Then he went on to earn a BA from San Diego State University and an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. I never attended it. I was too busy in medical school, but I'm very familiar with it. And I've known some people who were there. As he stated in a 2007 interview, my response to the chaos of my childhood has been to embrace formalism as an adult artist. And he writes mostly rhyming poetry. The football thing was not one of those, but it's a great poem, nevertheless, I think. Katrovas also speaks Czech, the Czech language. In 1989, he took a Fulbright fellowship in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and he witnessed the Velvet Revolution there. He is the founding academic director of the Prague Summer Program, but he spends most of his time in the United States. And he has translated some Czechoslovak poetry. Anyway, if that isn't a varied enough poetry program for you today, I don't know where to tell you to go to get a more varied program, but that's the best I can do. And I hope you enjoy it. I'll see you next week. Bye now.